In the infamous vertical self-management center, Goreng awakens from his slumber to a dreary concrete cell embellished with the inscription 48. A bed and a sink are the only amenities provided, with a gaping hole in the middle of the chamber, ominously referred to as the pit by Goreng's cellmate, Trimagasi. This penitentiary comprises a multitude of floors, each housing a pair of inmates who are forced to employ aliases sanctioned by the establishment. Nourishment is lowered by means of a hovering platform, granting prisoners 2 minuscule minutes to indulge in their fill before it departs for a lower tier. The lower the floor, the more scarce the sustenance. At the end of each month, prisoners are shuffled and sent to different floors. Goreng witnesses the platform's descent for the first time, taking a strategic stance by declining to ingest any provisions, electing to forfeit his meal to those on the lower floors. Trimagasi proceeds with his meal, smearing his saliva on the table, knowing that those above follow with the same unhygienic ritual. Goreng astutely claims an apple for a later time, but soon comes to an unyielding realization as the cell's temperature rises rapidly. The keeping of food is considered a cardinal offense. Hence, Goreng has but one recourse: to discard the apple or face the threat of burning alive. Meanwhile, Goreng recollects his interview prior to enrollment, where he acquiesced to the notion of stay until the expiry of the designated period. Upon admission, each inmate is permitted to bring a solitary memento, and Goreng chose a treasured copy of Don Quixote. It transpires that Goreng had volunteered himself to serve 6 months in exchange for a certified diploma. On the subsequent day, Goreng spurns the platform yet again, prompting Trimagasi to denounce Floor 48 as a cataleptic waste. Goreng boldly solicits Trimagasi's account, to which Trimagasi discloses that it began with a treaty advertisement on the telly. He had splurred on an extraordinary knife he saw on the telly. However, just a few days after his purchase, a fresh advertisement hit the screens promoting a superior knife. This caused him to fly into an uncontrollable rage, resulting in him hurling the television out of the window and tragically taking the life of a passerby. Trimagasi was given a choice: either be admitted to a psychiatric hospital or be thrown into the hole. As can be guessed, he chose the latter. He had descended to as low as level 132, but he was confident that there were still more floors beneath him as he could see them below. Surviving on meager rations in the lower levels wasn't a significant issue for a month, but getting stuck on 2 lower levels consecutively could be a daunting prospect. Goreng pleaded with the inmates on the higher levels to ration their food, but his pleas remained unanswered. Trimagasi answered his plea by urinating on the level below, demonstrating a callous disregard for those beneath him. He bragged that he had brought the knife he bought on the telly with him. When the platform arrived the next time, Goreng finally began to feast. He also witnessed a person from the upper floors plunging through the hole, while Trimagasi informed him that this was a regular occurrence, but no one ever helped them. Trimagasi boasted about the numerous floors he had been on and predicted that they would be cellmates the following month. Goreng realized that prisoners were retained together when shifted and freaked out after understanding that Trimagasi had eaten his last cellmate in the lower floors. When the platform arrived again, Miharu was on board, injured and in need of help. Goreng was deeply concerned, but Trimagasi urged him to ignore her. Miharu descended to the lower levels every month to search for her lost child, killing every cellmate she had to maximize the likelihood of being reunited with her offspring. The individual they saw sinking down the hole was most certainly her other victim. Trimagasi proceeded to clarify that, unlike herself, he had never taken a life. He had merely feasted on the corpse that had fortuitously landed on his floor. As the platform ascended to the next level, the prisoners attempted to exploit Miharu. Goreng vehemently commanded them to desist. However, his intervention proved unnecessary. Miharu promptly dispatched the assailants and returned to the platform. At month's end, the prisoners were subdued with gas and relocated. Upon regaining consciousness, Goreng discovered that he had been restrained to his bed on level 171 by Trimagasi, who explained that he had taken this measure as Goreng was younger and more robust, and therefore posed a threat to Trimagasi's survival. The din of anguished wailing emanated from the other floors as the prisoners adjusted to their new levels, and when the platform eventually arrived, nary a morsel remained. After an arduous 8 days, Trimagasi declares it's high time he satisfied his hunger pangs. Disregarding Goreng's pleas for clemency, Trimagasi extracts a chunk of flesh from Goreng's thigh using his knife. However, before he can indulge in his cannibalistic desires, the platform arrives with Miharu aboard. Remarkably, Miharu recollects Goreng's anxiety for her well-being and springs into action, fiercely attacking Trimagasi with his own weapon. Consequently, she liberates Goreng and hands him the implement to finish off their oppressor. Alas, Goreng passes out, only to awaken later in bed, his leg bandaged with a torn piece of bedsheet, courtesy of Miharu, who is presently feasting on Trimagasi's remains. Without a word, she offers Goreng some meat and water before departing on the platform. Then follows days of corporeal decay, which affords Goreng an opportunity to nourish himself with worms. Sadly, his consumption of Trimagasi's remnants trigger hallucinations and delusions, with the ghostly visage of his departed oppressor haunting him while he eats. As the month draws to a close, gas envelops their cell, inducing a dream state in Goreng, wherein he is enjoying the company of a woman. Upon awakening, he is surprised to find himself in the company of Imogiri, the woman who had interviewed him when he had volunteered to enter the prison. Her pet dog is also present, which she had brought with her. Without beating around the bush, Imogiri reveals that she volunteered as Goreng without knowing that people were dying inside the prison. Imogiri was aware of the daunting reality. With 200 levels, the food supply was barely enough to keep the prisoners alive. She suggested that if everyone only consumed their necessary amount, the supplies could suffice. But Goreng saw this as a preposterous idea, and even speculated if a child's death could bring about a necessary change. Imogiri, however, was certain that no child could be sacrificed due to company policy, which does not accept individuals under the age of 16 within the facility. When the food arrived, Imogiri nourished herself reasonably and shared her provisions with her four-legged companion. She then proceeded to prepare extra rations for the next block of prisoners with the hope of instilling a sense of camaraderie. But her attempts were futile, and Goreng clarified that the administration did not support solidarity. Imogiri disliked the notion that her former employer was evil, as it had previously been harmonious. Goreng stated that her past working status allowed her to choose him as a cellmate. Despite the lack of response, Imogiri persisted in distributing fair rations every day. However, her generosity was reciprocated with apathy from the prisoners below. 2 weeks later, Goreng had enough of the indifference and threatened to defecate on the food if they did not heed Imogiri's instructions. The consequences worked, and they began sharing the message through each level. Later on, the platform arrived, carrying an unconscious Miharu. She was immediately attended to by Goreng and Imogiri, who provided her with medical aid while the dog seized the opportunity to smuggle more food. As the lift departs, the room's temperature drops considerably, leaving Goreng shivering. He frantically pursues the thieving canine in a bid to retrieve the stolen sustenance before facing punishment for breaching the regulations. Later that night, Goreng relinquishes his bed to Miharu and resigns himself to sleeping on the floor. However, his slumber is disturbed by the sound of a scuffle. To his surprise, he discovers that Miharu has slaughtered the dog to satisfy her hunger. Come morning, Miharu boards the platform, leaving Goreng with the unsettling task of informing Imogiri about her desperate quest to find her offspring. Despite Goreng's belief that Miharu was a mother searching for her child, Imogiri reveals the harsh truth. The actress had embarked on this perilous journey alone, motivated purely by a willingness to contribute like Goreng. Imogwiri was an unwitting martyr, sent down to the depths without a clue as to the horrors that awaited her. Cancer had been her opponent for 3 long years, and even though she knew her time was limited, she volunteered for this dark pit, hoping to make a difference. But after she lost her battle, it seemed as though Imogwiri had lost her willpower too. Goreng, her cell companion, beseeched her to consume something, anything, on their last day on the 33rd floor. He knew that sustenance might be scarce in the days that followed, but Imogwiri was too despondent to even leave her bed. The next day, Goreng awoke to find himself on level 202, a revelation that was enough to drive Imogwiri to take her own life. Trimagasi, ever looming and persistent in his madness, watched as their spirits beckoned Goreng to cannibalize Imogwiri's withering body. Goreng tried to ignore their frenzied clamor, pitching himself into idle distractions like devouring pages from his book or scratching marks into the wall with a chipped plate. However, his hunger ultimately prevailed, and he succumbed to the gruesome task of feeding on Imogwiri's emaciated form. Trimagasi served as his scrupulous guide, directing Goreng's cutlery and instructing him viciously. Time passed, and the next shift commenced, with Goreng rejoicing at his placement on the 6th level. It was then that he met Miharu, feral and threatening, but he knew that she too was a mere figment of his sleep-addled mind. His true cellmate, Baharat, was bubbling with enthusiasm, for he had brought a rope, hoping it would be the ladder to their escape. He giddily called out for aid, beseeching the denizens of the 5th floor to lend a hand. The scene above is one of cruelty and disgust. The couple taunts poor Baharat before acquiescing to take hold of the rope, but just as Baharat starts to climb, the other prisoner pulls a disgusting move, dropping her trousers and defecating right in his face. Baharat falls back, repulsed and shaken. Goreng manages to catch him just in time, but the rope is lost in the pit below. As the platform arrives, they're forced to eat, while the clamor of raunchy prisoners on the 5th level rings in their ears. Eventually, the hallucinations of Trimagasi and Imogwiri come back to haunt Goreng. Trimagasi encourages him, saying he's doing well because he only has 1 month left. Imogwiri reminds him that change doesn't come easy. This gives Goreng food for thought, and he hatches a plan. He turns to Baharat for help. Together, they will jump onto the platform with makeshift weapons and ensure that everyone rations the food fairly. Goreng has calculated that there are likely around 250 levels, which he believes is feasible. Baharat agrees to team up with Goreng. They break a bed and use its metal pieces as weapons. On level 7, Goreng cautions Baharat that they mustn't allow the prisoners to take more food than they need. Those on the higher levels have eaten already and will eat again, while those on the lower levels struggle to survive. Baharat is initially hesitant to hurt his friends who helped him climb up, but he sees the wisdom in Goreng's plan and joins in vigorously. They threaten the prisoners and keep the food safe as they continue down the levels. Finally, Baharat comes across Brambang, an old wise man whom he holds in high esteem. Brambang nods in agreement with the boys' gutsy plan, yet reminds them that the soulless administration won't bat an eyelid if they actually succeed. Nevertheless, there may be hope in the hearts of the workers on level 0, so the crucial task at hand is finding a symbol that will resonate with them. After weighing up their options, Baharat and Goreng settle on using the iconic panna cotta, an opulent dessert that will awe the masses if it arrives at the very bottom untouched. With a sense of purpose, the duo soldier downwards, vigorously safeguarding the revered dessert and warding off curious bystanders with formidable threats. As they inch closer to their goal, the pair starts to distribute much-needed rations, which elicits profound gratitude from the famished occupants as they reach level 50. As they finally arrive on level 97, their emotional journey takes a heart-wrenching turn. they discover a frail and unwell elderly man, accompanied by a young boy struggling with a mental disability. Goring endeavored to offer some hearty soap to the elderly gentleman man, but to his bewilderment, the youngster cautioned them not to bother. The boy casually revealed that he planned to savagely execute the man later to devour him as prey. Upon arriving on the next level, Goring inferred that this was where Miharu had awoken. However, the platform did not make any stop here because there were no living souls. Goring's estimations had gone awry, and the number of levels exceeded 250. As they proceeded to the subsequent floor, they discovered two men assailing Miharu. One of the assailants gripped a sharp sword, whereas the other was brawny and gargantuan. Goring and Bharat had a strenuous time safeguarding themselves while attempting to assist the young lady. Bharat accomplished his mission first, vanquishing his adversary, and thereafter he assisted Goring in defeating the behemoth. Unfortunately, Miharu had already succumbed to her injuries, and Goring was overburdened with sorrow. However, Bharat urged him to jump onto the platform to avoid being trapped on the level. They traversed further down, doling out food rations to imprisoned captives, though on several floors, the only things present were lifeless bodies. At long last, the platform halted on the 333rd level, seemingly the final one. At first glance, the level appeared to be vacant, but to their astonishment, they discovered Molly, the missing child, hiding under the bed. As soon as they disembarked from the platform, it began descending once more. Goring pleaded with Bharat to hurl the panna cotta into the void, but Bharat remained obstinate. Contrary to their expectations, the chamber did not become intolerably hot or cold to punish them, and after much hesitation, Bharat ultimately handed over the panna cotta to Molly. The three of them decided to remain on that level, but Goring's memories were haunted by Trimagasi, Imogiri, and now Miharu as well. In a sudden twist, Bharat, the once skeptical prisoner, now finds himself in agreement with the spectral guests. He believes that the young girl is the key to the message they're trying to convey. However, tragedy strikes as Bharat succumbs to his injuries, leaving Goring to discover his lifeless body upon waking. Undeterred, Goring presses on with renewed determination, bringing Molly along with him for the ride. They descend to floor 0, a daunting abyss that's devoid of light and life. Suddenly, Trimagasi appears out of the shadows, urging Goring to disembark because he isn't an integral part of their mission. With bated breath, they both bear witness as the platform ascends with Molly, hoping that she'll be the beacon of hope that shines a light on the grotesque reality of their situation.